Hello, Luigi Nation. It's your favorite boomer here. I wear this hat in honor of my son, who's an Army Ranger. So thank you, all of you that serve. He's in regiment. Look at this up here. What is this? Let's talk about a federal grand jury today, because that's where we're at in the federal proceedings. Now, a federal grand jury is a closed-door proceedings where grand jurors evaluate evidence to determine if there's a sufficient cause to try someone for a crime. The grand jury's decision is called an indictment. What happens at a federal grand jury? Well, they have subpoena power. Evidence is presented. The government presents evidence to a grand jury, including testimony from witnesses and documents. Deliberations. The grand jury evaluates the evidence and applies the legal standard to determine if there's probable cause. Voting. The grand jurors vote on whether to indict the defendant or not. And at least 12 jurors must agree to indict. What's an indictment? An indictment simply means it's a written piece of paper. And it says, here are your charges. Other than that, it has no legal significance. Now, who attends a federal grand jury? The government attorneys, witnesses, interpreters, stenographers. Who is not allowed to attend? The public, the lawyers for the defense, judges aren't in there. And what happens after the hearing? If the grand jury indicts, the defendant then proceeds to trial. If the grand jury does not indict, the prosecutor may still at a later case try to bring it back if they get more evidence. The grand jury plays an important role in the criminal process, but not one that finds guilt or punishment of a party. Instead, after the presentation of the government's case, the grand jury will either decide to bring an indictment, and those are just formal charges, that's then followed by an arraignment. Now listen, a federal grand jury hearing is a closed-door proceeding, where a grand jury evaluates evidence to determine if there's sufficient cause to try someone for a federal crime. What happens there? Well, the government attorney presents evidence to grand jurors. The evidence may include witnesses, testimony, and documents. And the grand jurors can ask questions, okay? The grand jurors consider the evidence and they deliberate in secret. Now, if they find probable cause, they issue what's called an indictment, which is a written statement of the charges. Now, who's involved in a grand jury? I just picked this picture up here. It's a group of 16 to 23 people from the public who serve as a term. Usually the assistant United States attorney presenting evidence and advises the grand jury on what evidence to call. Witnesses testify before the grand jury, but cannot have a lawyer in the room with them. Lawyer has to wait outside. He's allowed to go outside and ask his lawyer for questions, but he can't go in there. There's a court stenographer. Grand jury proceedings, like trial jurors, grand jurors are just citizens selected randomly from voter registrations and other things. They may serve up to 18 months, but only need to appear in court a few days out of every month. Regular trial jurors in a criminal case are 12 people. In the federal system, they're called a petit juror. In a grand jury, it's between 16 and 23 people. You need 16 people to show up for there to be a quorum. Now, grand jurors proceed in strict confidence for two primary reasons. One, witnesses can speak without fear of retaliation. And two, if it protects potential defendants' reputation if the grand jury decides not to indict. So in that grand jury room, there will be no Karen Agnifilo, no Mark Agnifilo. No, they will not be there. There will be a prosecutor, and it's AUSA they call him, presenting evidence. And he explains the law to the jury and works with them to gather evidence and hear testimony. The grand jury's decision and a prosecutor's discretion. So at least 16 out of the grand jurors, as I told you, must be present for a vote, and a unanimous decision, unlike a petit jury, that's a fact-finding jury, have to be unanimous. Grand jurors don't. Only 12 of the 16 must concur to indict a defendant under the federal rules of criminal procedure. In a number of states, they do it differently, but I'm explaining the federal grand jury system because that's where we're at. Now, if the grand jury decides not to indict, that doesn't mean it's over. That means that they could still bring it to another grand jury as they collect more evidence. So a no bill, if a grand jury issues a no bill, that doesn't mean no jeopardy attaches to that. However, with a grand jury indictment, the trial will likely begin more quickly. After receiving the true bill or the indictment, that's where you go in front of the judge, and that's where you plead, not guilty and everything there. So that's your explanation of a grand jury. And what we're doing now is in the grand jury process, very secretive. I'm not allowed in there. And if they call my witness in there, if I have my client or I have a witness, I'm not even allowed in there. There's no judge in there. And the grand jurors can ask them whatever the hell they want to ask them. Okay? So, it's done in secret. That's a quick and dirty explanation of grand jury proceedings. This is your favorite boomer. How am I doing with the green screen? Pretty good, right?